Returning home from picking herbs on the mountain, I discovered that my sister, the Empress, who should have been in the palace, had her limbs severed and was hung upside down at our front door. The courtyard was littered with corpses everywhere. Only my mother remained, lying in a sea of blood covered in wounds, gasping her final breaths. I asked Mother what had happened. Mother told me, the new imperial concubine Liu wanted to watch your sister dance on burning coals. Your sister refused. In a fit of rage, the emperor had your sister killed, fearing future trouble. The emperor not only executed our entire Su family, but also slaughtered your father and the 100,000 Su soldiers who had helped him ascend the throne. Luoshuang, run. Before the emperor discovers you, run far away. Change your name and live on. I shook my head. I want revenge. Mother's face was filled with despair. The emperor now commands 1,000,000 troops. Even your father couldn't defeat him. How can you, alone, seek revenge? Who said I am alone? I whistled softly. In an instant, countless centipedes, snakes, and scorpions crawled toward me from all directions. Watching the swarms of centipedes, snakes, and scorpions rush toward me, and then crawl to my feet, standing motionless like servants, Mother's weak eyes suddenly widened, and her body began to tremble. The next moment, she looked at me and smiled with understanding, as if she finally realized something. When I found you in the Miao territory all those years ago, I knew you were not ordinary. It is true after all. As she finished speaking, Mother drew her last breath, but the smile still lingered on her lips. I knew she was at peace. I gently brushed the messy hair from Mother's forehead, just as she had done when we first met, using her fair, clean hands to wipe the mud from my face. Little one, are you willing to come with me? The smile on Mother's face back then was just like it is now, gentle and beautiful. As if under a spell, I nodded. I followed Mother out of the Miao territory and arrived at the Su household. The Su family was a prestigious military clan with a prominent status and strict rules. Mother had gone on a long journey and suddenly brought me, a child, back home, which sparked much gossip. Could it be that she had an illegitimate daughter all along, and only now felt comfortable bringing her back? General Su is a man of high virtue and prestige, who values reputation above all else. Madame Su has surely stepped on a landmine this time. Some wild child from nowhere. Does she really deserve to enter the Su family gates? General Su will definitely not agree. Ah, yes. General Su commands the 100,000 Su soldiers, striking fear into the borders. The thing he cares about most in life is the Su family's reputation. That day, he stood in the main hall, watching Mother lead me in. His brows furrowed slightly, and his gaze lingered on me for a long time. Just when all the servants of the Su manor thought he would kick me out of the house, he looked at me with pity, his eyes turning red. Such a fine child. How did you become so thin? That day, General Su, who had spent his life on the battlefield, broke tradition and cooked himself, preparing a table full of dishes for a child. Seeing me wolfing down the food, the general, who always valued rules and etiquette, beamed with joy. From now on, you are my daughter, Su Zhantian's daughter. Whoever dares to bully you, I will fight them to the death. Just like that, I became a daughter of the Su family. My food and clothing were exactly the same as my sister's. My sister never had any complaints about this. Instead, she protected me at every turn. Whenever other noble children mocked me for being a wild child, my sister would always be the first to stand in front of me and say firmly and powerfully, Luoshuang is not a wild child. She is my sister, a sister only 3 months older than me. She often got into fights and scuffles on my behalf. Even when father scolded her for losing the Su family's dignity, she would hold her head high and refuse to admit she was wrong. How could dignity be more important than my sister? Father would smile when he heard this. You silly girl. Protecting your sister is our job as parents. Why do you need to get yourself all bruised up fighting others? Father was a man of his word. He made sure those who mocked me all vanished from the capital the very next day. Back then, my sister would hold my hand with pride, her eyes sparkling. Luoshuang, our father is amazing. He defends our country, protects the people, and has never failed. Yes, father fought battles his entire life. He never let the enemy get close, never let the great Liang lose an inch of land, and never let the people live in fear. He was the general who protected the nation, beloved by the people, a great hero praised by everyone. He protected everyone, yet he could not protect himself. He did not die on the blade-strewn battlefield, but died within his own estate, struck 99 times, each blow deep to the bone. Those hands that protected the country and its people were still holding a sword at that moment, yet they were hacked off completely and discarded in a corner like trash. I picked up father's hand, placed it back against his arm, and then, with trembling care, wiped the blood from father's face. His eyes were not closed. closed. They were staring fixedly at the doorway, where my sister's broken body hung. My sister was the Empress of Great Liang, the daughter father treasured above all else. My sister, who had been afraid of pain since she was a child. Whenever she scraped her skin as a child, she would cry for ages. But now, her limbs had been hacked off. How much pain must she have been in? When Mom and Dad saw this scene, how much must they have suffered? I walked to the doorway, carefully untied my sister's body, found a cart, and piled the bodies of my parents and sister onto it. I dispersed the venomous insects covering the ground, and pushed the three of them slowly through the long streets of the capital. The people on both sides of the street saw me, stepped aside one after another, and wiped away tears with sighs. What a tragedy. The Su family was loyal to the end, yet they met such an end. Who told Concubine Liu to be more favored? Empress Liu was virtuous her whole life. She was no match for her. The emperor wiped out all 100,000 of the Su army. He clearly intended to root them out completely. The second daughter barely escaped with her life, yet she shows her face so brazenly. Isn't she just looking for death? The Su family treated her well. Now that their entire clan has been executed, perhaps the second daughter doesn't want to live on either. Everyone looked at me, shaking their heads with clicks of their tongues, as if looking at someone who was already dead. Just then, a 5-year-old child walked up with a bouquet of flowers. Big sister, today is General Su's birthday. Please give these flowers to General Su. My footsteps faltered. The tears I had held back for so long finally fell. Yes. Today was my father's birthday. I had left early that morning, hoping to find a medicinal herb for him. He had spent his life on the battlefield, and his body was riddled with old injuries. Whenever the seasons changed, he would be in agonizing pain, unable to sleep through the night. I had planned that, once I found that herb and cured my father's illness, I would ask him to resign from his post and enjoy his twilight years in peace. Father had agreed, and Mother was overjoyed. Your sister has been waiting for your father to retire for a long time. Your sister will come to celebrate your father's birthday today too. When she arrives, hearing this good news, he would surely be very happy. But they never lived to see my sister come to celebrate his birthday. Instead, they were met with her corpse and the annihilation of our entire clan. The herbs I had climbed the cliffs to find were now useless. I took the flowers from the child's hands, thanked him, and then brought my parents and my sister, whose bodies I had retrieved, to the outskirts of the city. I buried the three of them side by side. I knelt and kowtowed 3 times. Father, mother, sister, wait for me. I am going now to bring back the dog emperor's head to be buried with you. I placed the herbs I had picked from the edge of the cliff before my father's grave, then turned and walked toward the imperial palace. When the head guard at the gate saw me, he was stunned for a moment, then gave a scornful laugh. Oh, isn't this the stray the Seku family picked up? You're still not dead. I knew this head guard. In the past, when my father brought me to the palace to visit my sister, he would bow and scrape before me, calling me the honorable second miss at every turn. I glanced at him, but said nothing. The head guard was humiliated and enraged. A stray like you dares to ignore me. Then don't blame me for taking your head to claim a reward from the emperor. As he finished speaking, he drew his sword and slashed at me. I still did not move, but a venomous snake darted out from a corner, biting hard into the hand he used to swing the blade. The guard let out a miserable scream, bleeding from his 7 orifices instantly, and fell to the ground dead. At the same time, a dense swarm of centipedes, snakes, and scorpions poured in from every direction, gathering behind me into an endless black river. Seeing this, the other guards were dumbfounded, scrambling to run into the palace. A monster. No one dared to stop me anymore. I walked unimpeded into the Golden Throne Hall. On the Golden Throne, the Emperor sat high above, with an alluring woman nestled beside him. That was Consort Liu, the one who forced my sister to dance on burning coals. Civil and military officials stood on both sides of the hall, and 3,000 Imperial Guards oohed at the front with swords drawn, staring at me with sharp, hostile eyes. Upon seeing me, the Emperor narrowed his eyes. "Su Luoshuang, I thought you had escaped. I was just about to issue a wanted notice." As he spoke, he looked behind me, his eyes full of disdain. "Why bring these little trinkets here? Are you planning to perform for me and beg for mercy?" The Emperor looked down at me from his high seat, his sharp, majestic expression, a far cry from the boy who once knelt at my family's doorstep. Back then, he was the most neglected 9th prince in the palace, his birth mother having passed away early, suffering endless bullying in the palace, where even a hot meal was a luxury. My sister was kind-hearted, and seeing how pitiful he was, she would often use the opportunity of entering the palace to help him, bringing him clothes and food. Once when he had his leg broken by other princes, it was my sister who knelt outside my father's study for a day and a night, begging him to summon the best imperial physician, tending to him day and night to save his leg. Through their interaction, interactions, they developed feelings for each other and pledged their lives to one another. Later, when the late emperor fell gravely ill, the princes fought for the throne, leaving a trail of blood. He knew my father held the 100,000-strong Su army, so he knelt at the Su family gates, begging my father to send troops to help him. My father looked at him, his expression unusually grave. "Give me a reason to help you," he swore to the heavens. "I promise that in this life I will never fail a Yan. Once I ascend the throne, I will make her my empress and protect the Su family forever." My father believed him. He led the Su family army out in full force, helping him quell the rebellion, killing the other princes, and winning him the throne. He kept his word at first. Upon his ascension, he made my sister empress, but now only 2 years later, for the sake of a concubine Liu, who appeared from nowhere, he had my sister's limbs severed and slaughtered the entire Su family. At this moment, concubine Liu is nestled in the emperor's arms, pouting and acting spoiled. "Your Majesty, didn't you say you had already killed everyone in the Su family? How is it that one still remains? Do you not love me anymore? Are you trying to fool me?" The emperor put his arm around her waist, cooing dotingly. "My beloved, what are you saying? For your sake, I even killed the Empress who helped me win this empire. How could I not love you? As for this remaining survivor of the Su family, I promise, they will not live past today." Hearing this, concubine Liu smiled in satisfaction. I smiled too. "They laugh at me for being weak and gullible. I laugh at them for their arrogance." I stood in the center of the golden throne hall, looked straight at the emperor, and spoke slowly. "Your Majesty, how did my Su family ever wrong you, that you would go to such length to exterminate us?" At these words, the emperor chuckled and stood up from his dragon throne. He stood with his hands behind his back, looking at me with contempt. "Su Luoshuang, that question. Your father asked me that before he died too. I told him, your Su family is innocent, but I simply cannot tolerate your existence anymore. Your father's 100,000 troops have helped me kill too many people over the years, and know too many secrets. Every time I see them, I am reminded of how many corpses I stepped on to climb to where I am. I cannot sleep. So they had to die. I understood. The hunting dog is killed once the hare is caught. The bow is put away once the birds are gone. It has been this way for emperors since ancient times, but I still wanted to ask one thing. What about my sister? She truly loved you, did everything in her power to help and save you, and never once wronged you. When you laid your hands on her, did you ever think of her sincere devotion to you?" The emperor scoffed. "Sincerity, now that this world is mine. What use do I have for this sincerity? I admit your sister saved me and helped me. But every time I look at her, I am reminded of how I looked kneeling at your Su family's doorstep. I am the son of heaven, the supreme ruler. How can I live forever in that humiliating memory? Only when she is dead can I forget that past forever." My fists clenched tight, because he didn't want to live in the memories of his past. He killed everyone who had helped him in the past. How ridiculous, how deserving of death. I took a deep breath. Since that is the case, then today, I will seek justice for my parents and my sister. As I finished, concubine Liu laughed, laughing until she shook. "What an ignorant, wild girl. You think you're worthy of seeking justice from the emperor." The civil and military officials chimed in as well. "That is right. Even the Su family's 100,000 troops are all dead. What kind of trouble can you, a mere woman, possibly stir up? What a fool digging your own grave. I wonder if Empress Su's spirit in heaven, seeing the sister she protected for so many years being this stupid, would be angry enough to come back to life." Looking at these people, I couldn't help but smile. The emperor narrowed his eyes. "What are you laughing at?" I looked at him and said, word for word, "I am laughing at you all, for death is at your doorstep and you do not even know it." Hearing this, the emperor frowned, his tone turning completely cold. "Su Luoshuang, do you truly think that by bringing some venomous creatures here, you can turn the world upside down? Don't forget, I am the son of heaven, with 3,000 imperial guards and a 1,000,000-strong army. With these little tricks of yours, I can burn them all to nothing with a single fire. Guards, bring torches. Burn these poisonous things to death." As the words fell, the 3,000 imperial guards simultaneously lit their torches, pointing them directly at me and the snakes, scorpions, and centipedes behind me. The vast palace was filled with a murderous aura, and firelight spilled everywhere. Yet, I was not afraid in the slightest. Who said that was all? With that, I raised my hand and snapped my fingers lightly. In an instant, the clear sky suddenly darkened. Dark clouds surged from all directions, blotting out the sun. At the same time, the palace, which had been perfectly calm just moments ago, suddenly began to shake violently. It felt as if the earth were quaking and the heavens were collapsing. Everyone looked up in horror, staring outside the hall, their faces changing drastically. What is that? A sharp-eyed official even pointed outside the hall and shouted in disbelief, but no one answered him because everyone was stunned speechless. Outside the palace, countless birds flew in from the horizon. Wild geese, eagles, crows, bats. They were dense and thick, filling the sky and covering the earth. Like a massive black cloth draped over the vast sky, they landed on the roof of the Golden Throne Hall, on the stone steps of the plaza, and on every dragon-carved pillar, a solid mass of black, blocking out the last ray of daylight. Meanwhile, the tremors on the ground grew closer. Boom, boom, boom. The thunderous sounds grew closer, and louder thud. The next instant, the doors of the Golden Throne Hall were violently smashed open. Following that, a fierce tiger charged in first, and behind it came lions. Black bears, wolves, leopards, wild oxen, and giant elephants. They were massive in stature, violent and ferocious, looking at the people in the hall as if they were prey they had long been salivating over. Such a bizarre scene plunged the entire Golden Throne Hall into deathly silence. The officials scrambled to retreat, some knocking over the candle stands behind them, some with legs turning to jelly, collapsing to the floor, some with trembling lips, faces deathly pale, wetting themselves on the spot. How is this possible? Everyone was bewildered, yet what surprised them even more was that, after all the birds and beasts swarmed into the palace, they stood in orderly fashion, lining up in formation behind me, like soldiers awaiting my orders. The 3,000 imperial guards holding their torches watched this scene, not daring to take a single step forward. In the face of this overwhelming tide of beasts, their torches were tiny and laughable, and could not even harm these wild beasts in the slightest. Your Majesty, what is going on? Imperial Concubine Liu clutched the Emperor's sleeve tightly, her voice trembling. The Emperor did not answer her, but stared fixedly at me, the contempt in his eyes gone. Surrounded by all the birds and beasts, I stared expressionlessly at the Emperor. You just said that these things I brought, you could burn to nothing with a single fire. Facing my challenge, the Emperor's throat bobbed. His face turned ghastly pale, but he was, after all, the monarch who ruled the world. After a brief moment of shock, he quickly regained his composure. He snatched a sword from a guard's waist, pointed it at me, and shouted sternly, Luoshuang, do you think bringing a few beasts here can intimidate me? I am the ruler of this nation, commanding a million soldiers, stationed right outside the city walls. With a single command from me, they will enter the palace and capture you, no matter how many birds and beasts you have. Can they outnumber my million-strong army? As he finished speaking, the Emperor looked at the commander of the Imperial Guard. The commander understood immediately and ran quickly toward the palace gates, intending to order the troops to mobilize. But he had barely taken 3 steps when a lion behind me lunged forward and snapped his neck in one bite. The sound of shattering bone was clearly heard by everyone present. Screams erupted throughout the hall. Some were so terrified they fainted on the spot. The Emperor's hand holding the sword trembled slightly, but he still did not back down. He looked at me and said word by word, Luoshuang, I admit you have some talent to be able to command so many creatures. But if you think this is enough to get your revenge, you are sorely mistaken. I have reigned for 2 years, ruling the entire realm, with countless gifted people at my side. Why would I fear a mere girl like you? Just as he finished his sentence, an old voice suddenly echoed from outside the hall. His Majesty is right. I would like to see what kind of monster dares to cause such chaos in the imperial palace. Everyone turned to look at the source of the voice. An old man with white hair and a white beard appeared outside the Golden Throne Hall. He wore a black Taoist robe, held a horsetail whisk, and looked like a true immortal. Seeing this man, the Emperor's face lit up with joy. Grand Preceptor, you have finally emerged from seclusion. Grand Preceptor? I narrowed my eyes slightly. I had heard that after the Emperor ascended the throne, he invited a Taoist master from the deep mountains, honoring him as the Grand Preceptor. He had been in seclusion for years, ignoring the affairs of the world. I never expected him to appear today. The Grand Preceptor swept his gaze over the beasts, his brows furrowing slightly. Then he looked at me. So young, yet able to command 100 beasts. You do have some skill, but do you know where these powers of yours come from? I looked at him and said nothing. The Grand Preceptor smiled slightly and walked toward me, facing the gaze of the beasts behind me. He showed no fear at all. Instead, he examined me carefully and laughed. I never imagined that the little girl from Miao territory was still alive. My heart skipped a beat. You know me. The Grand Preceptor stroked his white beard and nodded slowly. I not only know you, I also knew your biological parents. I frowned. Why should I believe you? Although I didn't know who this Grand Preceptor was, I knew he was the Emperor's man, which meant he was my enemy as well. I would certainly not trust his words easily. However, facing my skepticism, the Grand Preceptor did not get angry. Instead, he looked at me with surprise. It seems you know nothing at all. Your adoptive parents kept it well hidden. I stared at him intently. What do you mean by that? The Grand Preceptor's expression darkened. He said with utmost gravity, very well, since we have met today, I shall tell you the truth. As he finished, the Grand Preceptor stared at me intensely and asked, do you know why 18 years ago today, the Miao border tribe was turned into a river of blood overnight, with corpses strewn across the fields? Hearing this, my breath hitched instantly. 18 years ago. Today. That was the very day I was found by Madame Su. I was 4 years old then. I vaguely remember being hidden by my mother inside a large vat filled with insect eggs. Outside the vat came wave after wave of slaughter and wailing sounds. I wanted to go out, but I couldn't move because my mother had placed a Gu poison on me. At the time, she had nervously instructed me, Luoshuang, there is danger outside. You must not run around. I waited and waited in the cold vat, waiting until I could finally move, before slowly rising and climbing out of the vat. But once I walked out and looked, I discovered that the once peaceful tribe was now covered in a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. The thick scent of blood stung my nostrils. I panicked instinctively. I was afraid my parents were among them, so I stood amidst the carnage and called out for them. But I called for a long time, and no one answered me, so I began to search through the bodies, checking them one by one, turning them over one by one. I looked at every single corpse carefully. I saw my playmates. I saw my uncles and aunts. I saw everyone I knew, but I could not find my parents. I didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. I only knew I was cold and hungry, scared and panicked, and could only huddle in a corner, waiting quietly. My mother had said she would not leave me behind. I don't know how long I waited. The sky turned dark and bright, then dark again. I lost count of how many days and nights had passed. I only knew that those uncles and aunts, their bodies were getting colder and harder. I was very hungry, but the food in the tribe was soaked in blood. I couldn't eat it. I could only go into the mountains to find wild fruit, but I didn't dare go far. I was afraid my parents would return and not find me, so I picked wild fruit on the edge of the tribe. Looking back as I picked, every time I looked back, I hoped to see my parents standing at the tribe entrance waving at me. But every time I looked back, there were only those motionless corpses. That day, I had brought back more wild fruit and sat at the entrance of the tribe, gnawing on the fruit bite by bite. It was so sour it made my teeth ache, but I had to eat it because mother said if I didn't eat, I would die. I didn't want to die. I still had to wait for my parents to come back. Just then, I heard footsteps. I jerked my head up, my heart filled with wild joy. Is it my parents? Have they come back? But the moment I looked up, I froze. It wasn't my parents who came, but a woman I had never seen before. She was dressed in plain clothes, her hair tied behind her head, her face showing exhaustion and anxiety. Her clothes were stained with mud, and her skirt was torn in several places by thorns, as if she had traveled a very long way. She saw me and also froze. We just looked at each other like that, neither of us speaking. After a long time, she slowly crouched down to be at eye level with me. Child, why are you here all alone? His voice was very soft and gentle, as if he were afraid of scaring me. I did not answer. I did not know who he was, nor did I know if he was a bad person, mother said. Not to talk to strangers without knowing if they are good or bad. I clutched the wild fruit in my hand warily and took a step back. He saw my movement and paused slightly, then forced a smile. Don't be afraid, I'm not a bad person. I'm just passing through. And came over when I saw someone here. Where are your parents? Hearing the words parents, my nose stung, but I held it back. I pointed to the tribe behind me. He looked in the direction I pointed, and then his body stiffened. He saw those corpses, saw the blood all over the ground, saw the destroyed houses. His lips began to tremble. It took a long time before he turned back to look at me. Have you been here all alone? I nodded. He looked at me, his eyes turning red instantly. Child, what is your name? I don't know why. Seeing his eyes turn red, I felt moved, and although it was the first time I had seen him, I always felt a sense of familiar closeness about him. So for the first time I spoke to him and told him my name, Luoshuang. He whispered it once and asked again, "Where are your parents?" I shook my head. "I don't know. I searched through everyone, but I couldn't find my parents." His body trembled slightly. After a long while, he reached out his hand and gently wiped the mud off my face. With a smile as gentle as mother's, he looked at me and asked softly, "Child, would you like to come with me?" Thinking back on that scene, my heart still feels warm to this day. If it weren't for Madame Su, I might have starved to death in the tribe long ago. So they not only raised me, but they are also my saviors. Now that they are dead, I must have my revenge. I looked at the state preceptor and said guardedly, "What exactly are you trying to say?" The state preceptor spoke slowly. Many years ago, there was a brilliant and talented figure in Miaojiang named Luoshuang. He was a genius rarely seen in Miaojiang in a century, not only able to command all beasts, but also able to communicate with all living things. 20 years ago, he married the most beautiful woman in Miaojiang and had a daughter named Luoshuang. That daughter is you. Ah, I shuddered violently. He was right. My father was indeed named Lu Yunxiao. When I was little, mother always called him Yunxiao. So, I remember. The state preceptor continued. Lu Yunxiao was gifted, but he was indifferent to worldly affairs, just wanting to live his own quiet life, never intending to be an enemy of the outside world. But he didn't know that an innocent man can be guilty simply by possessing a treasure. His ability to command all beasts attracted the covetous eyes of countless people, and the one who coveted it most was the then frontier general of the great Liang, Su Zhantian. I widened my eyes, my breath hitching. "You're lying. My foster father always cherished talent and was never a jealous man." The state preceptor gave a scornful smile. "You are right. Su Zhantian did cherish talent and was not jealous, but you should know that the thing he cared about most in his life, it is his reputation as a great general and his status that he cares about most." I looked at the Grand Preceptor and said nothing. I truly could not deny this point. My foster father spent his whole life in battle, and what he valued most was the Su family's reputation and his standing in the military. So, even when he was suffering agony from his old war wounds, he still dared not step back from the front lines. But does this prove he is the murderer who slaughtered my Miao people? Seeing my silence, the Grand Preceptor continued, "To obtain your father's secret beast-taming techniques and solidify his position as the protector of the nation." Su Zhantian pressed him step by step, even sending men to infiltrate the Miao territory, using both threats and bribes. When your father refused, he flew into a rage. 18 years ago today, he personally led his troops and slaughtered the entire Miao tribe that night. The Miao lands ran red with blood, and corpses littered the fields. And all of this was caused by your foster father, Su Zhantian, single-handedly. I stared intensely at the Grand Preceptor and said word by word, "Do you have proof?" The Grand Preceptor smiled slightly. "Proof? Does your foster father have a dragon-patterned jade pendant?" My heart gave a violent jolt. My foster father did indeed have a dragon-patterned jade pendant, emerald green throughout, with exquisite carvings. He never let it leave his side. I had asked him where it came from, and he only said it was a gift from an old friend, saying nothing more. Watching my expression, the Grand Preceptor smiled even more broadly. "That jade pendant is the proof. It was a personal item of your biological father, Lu Yunxiao. Back then, Lu Yunxiao and Su Zhantian once met, and they held each other in high regard. Your father gave him his personal pendant as a token of their bond. But Su Zhantian turned around and handed this pendant to the vanguard general responsible for the massacre. Do you know why?" I looked at him and did not speak. He continued, "Because on that pendant, your father had personally carved a map of the secret Miao tunnels. That was proof of your father's trust in him, and the key Su Zhantian used to slaughter your entire clan." Hearing this, my body swayed. I had seen that pendant countless times. Every time my foster father polished it, his eyes were filled with complex emotions. I thought it was his nostalgia for an old friend, but it was actually his mark of guilt. The Grand Preceptor continued, "If you don't believe me, you can go and look at the back of that pendant. See if there is a cloud carved on it. That is the totem of your father, Yunxiao." I clenched my fists. I don't need to look. I already know that the back of that pendant is indeed carved with a cloud. I have seen it countless times, and it is etched in my memory. Watching my face turn pale, the Grand Preceptor pressed on relentlessly. "Su Luoshuang, you think Su Zhantian was so good to you because he was kind-hearted. You are wrong. It was because of guilt. He raised you to atone for his sins. He was good to you because he had a guilty conscience. Your foster mother brought you back from the Miao lands, also because she knew what Su Zhantian had done and wanted to make amends. But what is the point of making amends? Your parents are dead. Your people are dead. Your entire Miao tribe is gone, no matter how well they treat you. Can it bring your parents back to life? My body began to tremble violently. My foster father's face flashed through my mind repeatedly. The way he cooked for me himself. The way he said with red eyes, "How did such a child get so thin?" The way he patted my head and said, "If anyone dares to bully you, I will fight them to the death." And the way he waved his hand when I went to gather herbs, saying, "I'll be waiting for you to come home." Were those all lies? That affection, that care, was it all out of guilt? I don't know. I don't know who to believe. Seeing my pain and struggle, the Grand Preceptor took a step forward. "Tell me, aren't you curious? How did Lady Su, a sheltered woman, happen to appear so coincidentally in the Miao territory thousands of miles away?" My heart gave a violent jolt. I have actually thought about this question many times. Having been by my foster mother's side for years, I noticed she lived in the Su residence all year round and rarely went out. As for traveling far, it had been a full 18 years since she had ever left, so I am also very curious. Why 18 years ago, she suddenly appeared in the distant Miao territory and just happened to save me? Was it truly a coincidence, or was it intentional? The Grand Preceptor watched my changing expression, his smile deepening. "That is because Lady Su was also from the Miao territory. She is your biological aunt, your mother's own sister." I was struck as if by lightning, frozen in place. "Lady Su is my aunt," the Grand Preceptor continued. "Back then she was also in love with your biological father, Luoshuang. But your father chose your mother. She had no choice but to leave the Miao tribe in bitterness. Later, she met Su Zhantian and married him, but she could never let go of those feelings in her heart. Consumed by love and hatred, she told Su Zhantian about your father's extraordinary skills. She lured him into slaughtering the entire Miao tribe. He went to the Miao territory just to confirm whether your parents were truly dead or not. He took you away and raised you by his side just to be safe. If your parents weren't dead, he could use you as leverage to threaten them." Hearing this, my body began to tremble violently. Impossible, impossible. Lady Su treated me like her own daughter and cherished me for 18 years. Before she died, she even urged me to run, to survive. How could he be that kind of person? But the Grand Preceptor's words pierced my heart like needles. I don't want to believe these things, but I cannot help but doubt. Why would Lady Su, who stayed in the deep courtyard, happen to appear in the Miao territory thousands of miles away? And those words she said before she died. "When I found you in the Miao territory back then, I knew you were no ordinary child." From this, it is clear that she indeed knew my identity all along. But did she and my foster father really slaughter my entire clan? I don't know. I don't know who to believe. Just as I was filled with doubt, the Grand Preceptor's tone suddenly turned gentle. "Su Luoshuang, I know this is hard for you to accept, but this is the truth. The Xiao couple caused the death of your biological parents and slaughtered your entire clan. Now that they are dead, it is only what they deserved. Why must you make an enemy of the emperor for their sake? Your ability to command beasts is the orthodox heritage of the Miao, a treasure left to you by your father, but you don't even know how to use it properly right now." I looked up at him. He was right. Although I can summon the beasts, that is only the most superficial application. My father could command all things and communicate with all beasts, yet I can only reach this point. The Grand Preceptor looked at me, his eyes full of admiration. "Luoshuang, I have practiced for decades. I have mastered all manner of mystical arts. If you are willing to become my apprentice, I am prepared to teach you everything I know, allowing you to carry on your father's legacy and restore the glory of the Miao border. Not only that, but I can also ensure your survival." I looked at him and said coldly, "Why should I trust you?" The Grand Preceptor smiled indifferently. "I know you have your doubts, but you have no other choice." I frowned slightly. "What do you mean by that?" The Grand Preceptor's lips curled. "Let me show you what true beast mastery really is." As he spoke, he suddenly raised his hand. A golden light flew from his palm, shooting straight out of the hall immediately after. The birds in the sky suddenly began to cry out in unison, as if responding to his summons. They circled above, forming various patterns, changing with the Grand Preceptor's gestures. The beasts on the ground that were originally under my command actually started to become restless as well. It seemed they wanted to prostrate themselves at his feet. My heart skipped a beat. This old man truly has some skill. The Grand Preceptor withdrew his hand and looked at me with an arrogant expression. "How does my beast-taming art compare to yours?" I took a deep breath and lowered my head. "I am no match for you." The Grand Preceptor nodded in satisfaction. "The reason you dared to storm the palace and seek revenge all on your own is precisely because of these beasts at your command. But my skills are superior to yours. If you do not submit, I can make your trump cards vanish into thin air. At that point, you will be nothing more than an ordinary woman without any support. It would be easy for the Emperor to kill you. I lowered my head slightly, softening my attitude. Then what would you have me do? Seeing that I know how to play along, the Grand Preceptor spoke leisurely. You are a clever person. You should understand that a wise person submits to circumstances. As long as you are willing to take me as your master, I guarantee, not only can I save your life, but I can also help you surpass me within 3 years. By then, you will not only inherit my mantle, you can even restore the Miao territory to its former glory and bring honor to your family name. I looked up, my face filled with pleasant surprise. Grand Preceptor, are you truly willing to teach me? The Grand Preceptor nodded. Naturally, I hesitated for a moment, then asked, and what about the Emperor? The Emperor spoke up immediately. For the sake of the Grand Preceptor, I am willing to let bygones be bygones and spare your life. I remained silent for a moment and finally nodded. Very well, I agree. Upon hearing this, the Grand Preceptor was overjoyed. He strode up to me and reached out to pat my shoulder. My good apprentice, I, your master. Before he could finish his sentence, my hand had already moved. A flash of cold light streaked by, and the venom-coated dagger, hidden in my sleeve, plunged straight into his abdomen. The Grand Preceptor's smile froze on his face. He looked down at the dagger buried in his gut, then looked back up at me. His eyes were filled with disbelief. You. I looked at him and asked in a low, measured voice, tell me, where have you hidden my birth parents? The Grand Preceptor shuddered. You, what are you saying? I Sanson stared him down. Stop pretending. From the moment you appeared in the Golden Throne Hall, I could feel it. You carry the scent of my birth parents. I had indeed sensed this long ago, but at the same time I also realized the Grand Preceptor's power was greater than mine. The reason I feigned surrender just now was to find an opportunity to strike a fatal blow. At that moment, the Grand Preceptor's face turned deathly pale. The look he gave me was filled with astonishment. I continued, when I was 4 years old, my mother hid me in a large vat. When she cast the Jiu poison on me, she had suffered a severe injury. To this day, I still remember the aura of her wound, which is identical to the power you possess. I had always wondered who slaughtered my Miao tribe. It wasn't until you appeared that I understood it was you. You were the one who slaughtered my entire tribe. You were the one who abducted my parents. You coveted my father's abilities, wanting to seize his secret beast taming techniques. You hid them away, tortured them, and forced them to hand over the secrets. It has been 18 years and you still haven't gotten what you wanted, have you? The Grand Preceptor clutched his abdomen, staggering backward. He looked at me, his eyes filled with horror. How did you know? I sneered, because you are too foolish. If you hadn't said Lady Su was my aunt, I might have believed you to some extent. But you did say it. Even I didn't know my mother had a sister. How could you possibly know that? The only possibility is that you forced it out of my... He got it from his parents. The Grand Preceptor's expression changed completely. He lunged backward, trying to escape, but a tiger behind me had already pounced. It bit down on his leg, dragging him to the ground. I walked up to him, squatted down, and looked at him. Grand Preceptor, I will ask you one more time. Where are my parents? The Grand Preceptor stared at me and suddenly laughed. He laughed hideously. He laughed maniacally. What a sharp-witted girl. I truly underestimated you. That is right. Your parents are indeed in my hands. But do you think you can save them just by finding them? I have placed a seal on them, which only I can undo. If you kill me, they will only be waiting for death. I looked at him, saying nothing. The Grand Preceptor thought I was afraid, and laughed even more wildly. What is the matter, scared now? If you're smart, let me go immediately, and kowtow to me to admit your mistake. If I'm in a good mood, perhaps I might spare your life. I still said nothing. I simply raised my hand, and gently pressed it onto the top of his head. Then I closed my eyes. The Miao tribe has a secret technique, which can read a person's memories, but it requires immense talent and deep cultivation. I had never used it before, but I had seen it in my father's secret manual. At this moment, I wanted to try. I attempted to use the method from the manual, probing my consciousness into the Grand Preceptor's mind, searching piece by piece. Soon, I saw a dark dungeon. I saw two figures locked in iron chains. I saw their haggard faces, their withered bodies. I saw my father. They were still alive. My tears streamed down. I withdrew my hand and opened my eyes. The Grand Preceptor lay on the ground, foaming at the mouth, his body convulsing. Forcing a memory reading would cause him irreversible damage, but this is what he deserves. I stood up and looked toward the outside of the hall. I can sense it. My parents are in the secret dungeon beneath the palace. I turned to look at the Emperor. He is already slumped on his throne in terror, shaking all over. Imperial Concubine Liu cowers behind him, her face deathly pale. The civil and military officials are all kneeling kneeling on the ground, not daring to even lift their heads. I leave the majority of the sentient and beasts behind to guard everyone present, and then I walk toward the exit of the hall. There are some things I must ask about personally. I pass through the Hall of Supreme Harmony, cross the plaza, and walk through gate after palace gate. Finally, I arrive at the underground dungeon. It has been abandoned for a long time, overgrown with weeds, and covered in thick cobwebs. I stand in the center of the dungeon, close my eyes, and sense their presence. Then I open my eyes and look down at my feet. It's right here. I raise my hand, and the tigers behind me step forward in unison, using their sharp claws to dig up the stone tiles on the floor. They dig layer after layer, until finally a dark, gaping entrance is revealed. I walk inside. The dungeon is very deep, very dark, and very damp. The air is filled with the stench of rot. I follow the steps downward, walking for a long time. Finally, I see two iron doors. The doors are covered in dense talismans. I raise my hand, tear off the talismans, and push open the iron doors. They are skin and bones, their hair white and thin, their faces covered in wrinkles, but I recognize them instantly. It is my mother and father. Hearing the commotion, my mother struggles to lift her head. She sees me, stuns, and then her tears come pouring out. Shuangar. Her voice is hoarse, so weak it is almost inaudible, but I hear her clearly. I rush over, kneel before her, and hold her, tears streaming down my face. Mother, it is me. It is me. My mother tremblingly raises her hand, touching my face. Shuangar, my Shuangar, you are still alive. You really are still alive. My father wakes up too. He looks at me, tears flowing down his aged face. Shuangar, my good daughter, you. How did you find this place? I hold them both, sobbing uncontrollably. After a long time, I finally calm down. I break their iron chains and help them walk out of the dungeon. The moment we step out of the cold palace, the sunlight is so bright they cannot open their eyes. They haven't seen the sun for too long. 18 years, 18 whole years. They were imprisoned in that dark, sunless underground dungeon. 18 whole years. I help them walk step by step back to the Hall of Supreme Harmony. Inside, the Emperor is limp with fear, stared down by several lions, sweating profusely. Seeing me help a pair of people who look like withered old ghosts walk in, his eyes widen. This is, I ignore him and instead crouch down to look at the Grand Preceptor lying on the floor. He is still alive, but he is twitching in agony, frothing at the mouth, lacking even the strength to scream. I look at him and say word by word, Grand Preceptor, you just said my foster father slaughtered the Miao territory and that my foster mother betrayed my parents out of spite. Now my parents are right here. Do you dare to say that again to their faces? The Grand Preceptor's eyes moved with great difficulty. He looked at my parents. Suddenly, his pupils contracted. His lips began to tremble violently. My mother walked slowly toward the Grand Preceptor. She spoke in an incredibly cold voice. Yuan Qingzi, it has been 18 years. You imprisoned us for 18 years, and that wasn't enough. You still wanted to deceive my daughter. My father also frowned and said in a deep voice, for all these years, you have never been able to obtain what you wanted. Do you know why? The Grand Preceptor opened his mouth, but no sound came out. My father continued, because what you practice is evil sorcery. You stole the basics of the Miao border arts, thinking you were invincible. But you didn't know that the true art of beast taming requires empathy with all living things, not plunder. You captured me for 18 years and tortured me for 18 years, but you will never get my true inheritance because you are not worthy. Blood and tears flowed from the Grand Preceptor's eyes. I don't know if it was from pain or regret. My mother stopped looking at him and instead looked at me, saying softly, Shuangar, your foster mother was indeed your aunt and my own younger sister. Back then, she did have feelings for your father. I listened without saying a word. My mother continued. But she never harmed us. She left the Miao border because she didn't want to make things difficult for me. She married your foster father because she truly loved him. He came to the Miao border because he sensed that I was in danger and rushed over specifically to save me, but he arrived too late. By the time he got there, the Miao border had already been slaughtered by Yuan Qingzi and his men. He thought we were all dead and only found you. He took you away to take care of you for us, Shuangar. He owes us nothing. It is we who owe her. Listening to my mother's words, tears welled up again. It was just as I thought. Lady Su was indeed not my enemy. She was my own aunt. She treated me with true sincerity. My mother looked at me and said softly, Shuangar, your foster father did have a friendship with your father, but that friendship was genuine. They felt they had met too late in life and became sworn brothers. That jade pendant was truly given to him by your father himself. His kindness toward you was all from the heart and expected nothing in return. I closed my eyes and nodded heavily. I know, mother, I know. Foster father and foster mother, they were good people. I just knew it. Their kindness toward me was all real. My mother smiled. She hugged me and whispered, "Good child, your aunt raised you very well." I let go of my mother and turned to look at the emperor. Upon meeting my gaze, the emperor's body shook violently and he slid right off the dragon throne. The dignified ruler of a nation looked like a stray dog at this moment. I walked up to him and looked down at him. "Your Majesty, do you still remember? You once swore to the heavens that you would treat my sister well and protect the Su family for the rest of their lives. But you broke your word. Tell me, shouldn't you pay the price?" Hearing this, the emperor's body began to tremble violently. "What do you want to do?" I am the emperor. I crouched down to look at him. "Don't worry, your majesty. I won't let you die too quickly. I will make you taste." Bit by bit, the suffering my sister endured. I stood up and waved my hand. Several fierce tigers lunged forward, tearing at him as they dragged him away. The emperor's wails echoed through the heavens. Consort Liu screamed and tried to flee, but was swatted to the ground by a black bear. I looked at her and said coldly, "When you forced my sister to dance on hot coals, did you ever think this day would come?" Consort Liu, her face streaked with tears, shook her head frantically. "No, it wasn't me. The emperor made me do it." I nodded. "I know, but just like him, you must pay the price." As I finished speaking, another tiger stepped forward and dragged her away. An hour later, the three of us, my parents and I, walked slowly, each carrying a head, the state preceptors, the emperors and consort Lius. I knelt before the graves, placing the three heads in a row before the graves of my foster parents and my sister. My parents stood behind me, saying nothing. "Aunt, uncle, sister, I have brought you the head of that dog of an emperor." My mother also knelt before my aunt's grave, choking back sobs as she spoke. "Sister, thank you for taking care of Luoshuang all these years. If there is an afterlife, I will serve you like a beast of burden to repay you." My father also knelt before my foster father's grave. "Brother Su, when we first met years ago, we drank and laughed together, swearing an oath of brotherhood. You gave me your armor. I gave you my jade pendant. That was a bond of true sincerity. I, Lo Yun Shao, will never forget you and the great kindness you showed us." The three of us spoke at the graveside for a long time before leaving. After walking a great distance, I looked back one last time. Under the setting sun, the three graves stood in silence. The heads had already been carried off by wild dogs, leaving only 3 tombstones shimmering in the twilight. I withdrew my gaze and looked ahead. Ahead lay the direction of the capital. A tough battle still awaited there, for after all, the emperor is dead, the court is in chaos, and the people are terrified. I must return to clean up this mess, not for any other reason, but for the realm my foster father spent his life protecting. It cannot be allowed to fall apart like this. This was the thing he risked his life to guard, and I must protect it for him.